Streaming live from the Paul and Catherine Ranke Memorial Studio, this is TV Free Baltimore. Support for TV Free Baltimore comes from viewers like you. Become a TV Free Baltimore member by visiting patreon.com/tvfreebaltimore.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
Today, good leadership at every level of our government is more important than ever. In the last 2 years, our state and local governments became more and more authoritarian in the name of saving us from the pandemic, even with a Republican governor at the helm. Elections have consequences, and it's for this reason TV Free Baltimore is creating a series of videos highlighting candidates running in the upcoming Republican primary. Republican Tim Fazenbaker just announced his candidacy for the House of Delegates in District 6, and he's in our studio tonight. If you're elected to the General Assembly, what will be your top 3 priorities?
Well, that's a great question. I have many, but what I really would focus on first is somehow fixing this failing education system in this state. And that could be addressing things like Kerwin, which never should have been passed, never should have been even at the forefront of legislation. So we need to make sure that we hold people accountable again for where this education default is happening. We need to make sure we know where that money is going for as well. Number 2, we have to address the crime that's been going on across this state, starting in Baltimore City, now in surrounding counties. We see crazy amounts of murder and aggravated assaults, everything else. People aren't feeling safe. So these things need to be addressed as well. There's lots of money going into these departments, yet we're not seeing results that we should be seeing. Lastly, I believe that we need to have financial freedom and relief for the citizens across this state. There are many small businesses that are struggling, and they see that this government in this state is giving out billions of dollars to large corporations, which is in turn socialism. And we wonder, why are these major corporations getting billions of dollars, and yet your store or your friend's store, they're not getting that same kind of treatment? The tax burden as well on many of the people that are producing in this state is also a massive burden, along with the regulations and overburdensome actions on small businesses. We need to find relief so that we have businesses that come here, we have a strong tax base, and we still have a safety net to take care of people. But right now, this state is only focused on taking more of your money and doing less with it, except lining their own pockets. They are my 3 main focuses.
Most of the Republicans that have come in here for interviews say that school choice is number 1 priority for them. And I was wondering, do you support school choice, and how do you define school choice?
Yeah. As a conservative, the main belief is that you have the God-given right to do whatever you want with your life, as long as you don't take away that right from another. And what that means is that you have the choice and responsibility to educate your own children and then go from there. Many of the children we see in this state are falling behind. They can't read at a grade level. We've seen the recent stories with Patterson High School. It's terrible. We are failing our kids. Now, when I say we, what I mean is this state has prioritized the bureaucracy and the top-down approach. You see superintendents that are nominated and appointed, not elected, which I believe they need to be elected. I'm also working with legislation to make sure that happens. We see superintendents that are making exorbitant amount of money, why are they getting that much money when we have failing systems going on? We need to make sure that money follows the student. It's the parent's responsibility and choice to make sure that child is getting the best education that kid can get. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a specific school that these kids are going to. It can be a home school. It can be a vocational school. There are kids that are gravitating towards certain fields that make them the best citizen and best person that they can be. That's what we need to really encourage.
Well, how would you go about doing this? Would you introduce a voucher system?
Yes. Now we know that the Democrats are really going to be opposed to this because the teachers' unions, the machine the Democrats have down in Annapolis is very powerful. We need to find ways to get them on board to something like this, and we need to make it understood that our children in this state will not be as productive, not be great tax-paying citizens, not be innovators if we continue to have this failing system. We've seen it with other countries around the world, so we need to make sure that there's legislation brought up, and I will bring this kind of legislation to make sure that this money is following the students. There can be tax rebates, there can be any type of thing that will break what the Democrats have had a stronghold on with this. We can do it. We have to be innovative and find different ways, but the main thing is we need to do what's right for our children, not these bureaucrats and politicians.
Okay, would you also consider homeschooling part of the equation?
Oh, of course. I've spoken with many citizens and residents that have homeschooled their children, and they said the same types of things. They don't want their kids in schools because of either social engineering aspects, like critical race theory, which is racist in its own nature, and then they don't feel safe a lot of times in some of these schools. So I think that with COVID, we were able to see a lot more of what was going on in our children's schooling. So we realized that some things were being taught that we didn't approve of and we didn't like, and we didn't want that in there. We also saw that some kids do better in a virtual environment, and most kids do better in classroom setting. But instead of having these disruptive children in class where they're disrupting the learning for a lot of other children, now we learn that virtual learning can be an alternative for people who are having problems. There are so many ways that we can do this. Also, I think with homeschooling as well, it can run on its own network in a sense, but we can have the children at home doing virtual learning that are having other issues that can be addressed that way. So homeschooling has to be a priority as well, because the parent comes first with educating and rearing a child, not the government.
Well, I certainly believe in freedom, and when you talk about school choice, that's certainly a part of freedom, but the flip side of freedom is responsibility, and I support school choice because it puts the main responsibility onto the parent. And I think maybe with the state monopoly on education that we have today, a lot of parents just kind of shrug off the responsibility. And with COVID, it put a lot of people home, put a lot of the kids home, and it kind of created an infrastructure to where you could do homeschooling in a way that it was never done before.
I think we learned a lot in this process. As I was saying, we saw what was being taught, and we saw that parents needed to step up as well, and we became relaxed on a lot of these issues and things with education. But I think that's because our society has pushed this dependence on government and less dependence on the family. And you're seeing it all over the country with socialism being pushed forward, and this communism and Marxism, where they want to take the parent out of the equation. They want the government to raise your children. It's not how this is supposed to work. Your children are your responsibility, and it is your responsibility to make them the most productive citizen when they become an adult. And we can do that, but we have to put the emphasis back on the family. And when you take away the advantages of having a nuclear family or a multi-parent family, then you're really hurting the kid. And then, of course, that becomes cyclical, and we see violence increase. We see less educated people in our society, and then we become a less productive nation. And it could be the fall of our nation, all because we do not prioritize education the way that it should be.
If you're elected to the General Assembly, will you introduce legislation that would create term limits for those elected to the General Assembly?
Absolutely. I've stressed for years that there needs to be term limits on every position within government. There needs to be accountability, whether it's an elected position or whether it's someone that's nominated and put into a position. right in the beginning, when I become the next delegate in District 6, it will be one of my major focuses to push term limits. Many people do not know that there are lifetime pensions for people that are in office just for 5 years or whatever it is, and then they accrue these pensions for all the positions that they hold over their career. It's not fair to the American people and the tax-paying citizens to be basically paying for people to live off the system. That will be a major focus of mine, is to make sure that term limits are pushed.
Okay, I want to touch on something within the Republican Party. It's election season. We've had a lot of Republicans come in here to give their 2 cents about why they want to be elected. I heard a comment by a younger Republican, and for the viewer, I want to make sure that you understand I'm not a Republican, I'm a libertarian. But this young Republican came in, said that they went to some meeting of a Republican club and was basically saying that there's a generational gap between older people, like about my age, that she described as old 1980s Republicans that are only concerned about tax cuts and guns rights, whereas she said that she was a new type of Republican, a patriot that was worried about Donald Trump having his election stolen, and that there's some sort of generational gap within the Republican Party. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, first, Charles, I think you're 25, so your generation is probably right around there. But
right.
You're correct. There is a generational difference, and I think it goes back to the establishment. You will see a lot of throwbacks or retreads, as some people call them, and they've been in power forever, and then you lost a whole generation of people that were probably in my generation, in around 40, and those people feel disenfranchised because the Republican Party in this state did not give them a voice. Now you have a fresh, young group of people that their eyes were opened by President Trump, and they realized it's not about party first. No, it's about America first. And in this country, we need to put America first. We need to be Americans first. We need to be conservatives second, and then we can be a Republican. But the Republican Party doesn't match what a lot of people feel. But our views are on the right-hand side, so our views are with the Republican Party, but the Republican Party doesn't care about what a lot of people think. We need to bring in and have an inclusive tent of core principles, and that includes freedom, and that includes free and fair elections and transparency. We don't see that, and a lot of people have distrust in the government and in the political parties because we don't have that representation from people that are showing us these things. There are some out there. I definitely give praise to those who do, and I always will help work with those people to make sure that they stay in power or they move forward. But we have a new movement growing that is going to replace the establishment that's been in this state for years, and we are going to take over this party, and we're going to take over this state. We're going to make Maryland great again.
Okay, I want to touch on this big tent idea that many Republicans talk about today. There's been questions lately, particularly with what was going on up in Canada with the truckers. Which political party represents the blue-collar worker, the working man? It used to be the Democratic Party. At least you could make that argument. They were very much involved with the unions and the auto workers. But now it seems like the Democrats have become the party of welfare recipients and Section 8 renters. So now truck drivers, electricians, plumbers are starting to say, wait a minute, which party represents us? And we had somebody in here that was making the argument. In fact, it was the former governor of Maryland, Governor Ehrlich, was making the argument that the Republican Party is trying to become the party of the blue-collar worker, and that Trump was really trying to take the party in that direction. Do you want to comment on those ideas?
Governor Ehrlich's a great person. A quick story, I met Governor Ehrlich when I was 16 years old, and he actually was in the 4th of July parade in Dundalk, and I was in a high school band at the time, and he came up to me before he was even in Congress, and he started to speak. And we had a nice dialogue, and I never forgot that. And I had the chance last year to tell him that story, and it kind of inspired me to really get into politics, because he looked like an everyday American, an everyday Marylander, and he's from a similar town like where I'm from. That meant a lot, and I think his generation was the transition of the parties, where you had the Republicans starting to look out for the working man, the everyday man. In communism and Marxism, you see two sides. You see the haves and the have-nots. There is no middle class. So as you were saying, when you have the Democrats right now focusing on, you say, welfare, and then you have these billionaires, that's exactly what is shaping up. There is no middle class for them. Everybody is a servant, in a sense, to the haves. But when you have freedom, you have a middle class. And I think you see that more on the Republican side. We take care of our truckers. We take care of our first responders. We take care of our military. We take care of our disabled. Places like Dundalk, where I'm from, were always great because we took care of those that needed and those that were elderly. And we were punished because we did that, and we weren't giving that money to certain groups of people that the politicians said it needed to go to. That took out the fabric of what a town like Dundalk is, or even Arbutus, things like that. You have the movement on the Republican side that works for the middle class, even the poor, and you have some old-time Republicans still that will give billions of dollars to massive corporations pushing socialist-type ideals. And we call those people rhinos, Republicans in name only. And we've seen it for many years in this state because people believe in, Republicans will certainly believe in this state, the only way to win is to be a rhino or just to be a straight-up Democrat. There's a whole new wing and a whole new movement that's saying, no, we have to have core principles, and that's how we grow a big tent. And that is what will take over this party in this state and will make Maryland great again.
Well, I want to thank you for coming in this evening and giving us your 2 cents about the things that are going on politically in Maryland. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
I'd like to say that I'm just an everyday person. I got involved because I have 4 little kids, and I realized a few years ago that I had voted for local Republicans just because they were Republican. And I realized when certain things were happening in my district that weren't very conservative, as I started doing the research, I realized I didn't really vote for conservatives. I voted for rhinos. And many of you out there have done the same thing. I stepped up at that time to do what I thought was right for my children. And I ended up getting involved in politics. I lost my career because I ran for office before. And it's all worth it, because if we don't do something now, we will lose our country. So I ask everybody to show your support somehow. You can find me at timfazenbaker.com, TIMFAZENBAKER.com. And I will end with this. As always, stand for those that stand for you.
And to our viewers, stay tuned. We have many politicians coming in and out. It's election season. And if you want to hear what these politicians have to say so you can decide who to vote for, tune in to TV Free Baltimore.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.